Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha. Jai Ganesha, Jai Hindu Yoga Dharma. Are we being fooled? Or are we fooling ourselves? Maybe a little bit of both? You know, language is one of the great carriers of civilization. Imagine what it took to create a whole developed language. People had to work together, convince each other that certain sounds turned into certain words had a certain meaning. Wow. Great testament to past civilizations. But words do not merely communicate information, they carry whole histories with them, and philosophies and rituals, memories, identities, and entire worldviews. Now, in Hinduism, we say Mauna Vakya Para Brahman. The Supreme Brahman is known through silent speech. There's a time to keep silent. And yeah, we can keep out of trouble that way, but there's a time to speak up. And sometimes not speaking up gets us in more trouble. So we have to learn to speak up and use language to the best of our ability to communicate our ideas and try to use words accurately. Now, sometimes throughout history, many religions in philosophical terms have slowly drifted away from their original meanings. Now, sometimes this may be harmless, but sometimes it carries confusion with it, and sometimes the consequences become very profound. Now, of course, we focus on the Hindu Yoga Dharma, but this phenomenon is not unique to Hinduism. Many religions have experienced the gradual reshaping of sacred terminology. The Christian word apocalypse, for example, originally referred to an unveiling or revelation, yet today many people think only of a catastrophe and destruction. Look at the Buddhist word Zen, originally referred to a deep meditative tradition rooted in Sanskrit dhyana. Yet today it's often reduced to minimalist furniture, calm aesthetics, and spa-like tranquility. The Islamic word jihad, actually, is frequently collapsed into violence in public discourse, despite its broader meanings relating to struggle and striving. Religious vocabulary often becomes simplified as it enters mass culture. But perhaps nowhere in this process more visible today than with Sanskrit and Hindu terms. Many Sanskrit words have entered global culture, but often in forms so detached from their original context that their deeper meanings become completely invisible. In some cases, the transformation is so dynamic that the modern meaning barely resembles the original one. Take the Sanskrit word Arya. How many know that originally the Sanskrit word Arya meant and means noble, honorable, cultured, refined? It was primarily an ethical and cultural term, yet today, when many people hear the phrase Aryan, especially Aryan race, which is not, they think not of Sanskrit wisdom or noble conduct, but of neo-Nazis, racial supremacy, and the horrors of Nazi ideology. The original Sanskrit meaning has been almost completely eclipsed in the Western imagination. Consider swastika. This one's shocking to many. But it's reported that the Sanskrit word swastika, which refers to well-being, auspiciousness, and blessings, for thousands of years the symbol has appeared in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions, but it was found in many cultures before that. It's a sacred sign of harmony and good fortune, yet today, especially in the West, the symbol is overwhelmingly associated with Hitler, Nazism, genocide, and hatred. And ironically, bizarrely, the Nazis and Hitler himself never used the word swastika, but rather Hakenkreuz, or hooked cross, which actually has Christian connotations. Yet this Sanskrit term became globally entangled with one of history's darkest chapters. It's not safe for Hindus to use the swastika outside of India. Then there's the word caste. Many people automatically assume caste is an ancient Sanskrit Hindu concept. It is not. The term comes from the Portuguese word casta, meaning breed. European colonial observers applied it broadly to the complex Indian realities of Varna, Jati, which you can watch our video on that, lineage, occupation, and social grouping. Over time, an enormous range of Indian social structures became flattened into this one divisive word. This does not mean social hierarchy and discrimination did not exist in India, as they did everywhere. They certainly did. But it does mean that many people unknowingly discuss India through a colonial linguistic lens. Look too at the Sanskrit word mantra. This offers another revealing example. Traditionally, a mantra was not merely a repeated phrase or slogan, it was a sacred sound formula. They're Hindu divine chants, an instrument of the mind often tied to meditation, deity worship, religious spiritual transformation, and precise Sanskrit phonetics. Yet, today, even politicians casually say, "Oh, that's our mantra," referring simply to a campaign message or talking point. The sacred dimension has largely disappeared from popular awareness. The same process has happened with the word avatar. How many know that in Hindu traditions, where the word comes from, an avatar refers to a divine descent of the sacred into earthly form, such as the avatars of Vishnu. Yet today, avatar often means a digital profile image, an online identity, or a video game character or movie character. The metaphysical depth has become technological shorthand. Look at the word guru. A true guru is a Hindu teacher of Hindu Dharma, guiding one towards liberation, Atma Darshana, or what we call self-realization. Today, one can become a marketing guru, a fitness guru, diet guru, Wall Street guru, crypto guru. The sacred teacher has become a generalized expert. Karma, too, has similarly drifted off. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, karma refers to profound philosophical systems involving action, causation, ethics, rebirth, intention, and liberation, with the caveat that one's karma either uncovers or retards the experience of their atmana, their inner essence. In popular culture, karma often means little more than instant cosmic revenge. He was rude, so karma got him. The word chakra originally referred to subtle spiritual energy centers within the human being and found in yogic and tantric systems tied to Raja Yoga, consciousness, mantra, liberation. Today, chakras are often reduced to a colorful wellness icon, disconnected from their original metaphysical framework. Even the words Swami, and of course yoga, have undergone major transformation. A Swami is basically a Hindu monk who has spent decades in training. They've undertaken profound spiritual, religious disciplines and renunciation within the Hindu tradition. They're always unmarried people. Yet today this term is sometimes casually applied, marketed, stylized, or misunderstood entirely outside of its traditional context. Interestingly, years ago, in the News Journal in Delaware, they used to have a column called the Sports Swami, and they actually showed a caricature of someone who looked like a Swami in robes with a football for a turban on their head. And the Swami was predicting the week's scores. So we obviously wrote to the paper, contacted them and said, "Look, do you understand what an insult this is? Would you do that to a rabbi, to an imam?" And they wrote back and said, "We're so sorry. We had no clue." Wow. And these are educated people, quote unquote. So they actually changed it. This is one of those rare instances when a little bit of pushback initiated a change. So no longer is there a sports Swami. Now, perhaps there's no Sanskrit word that's undergone a greater global transformation than yoga. Let's look deeply into this. Yoga is part of the Hindu yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical process. In fact, it is the essence of Hinduism. The Sanskrit Hindu word yoga means yuj, Atman, Brahman, Cha. In English, to yoke, yuj, Y-O-K-E, to one's Atmana, and then Brahman. Now we're already deep into Hinduism. What is Atmana? What is Brahman? Atmana is the Hindu understanding of the inner essence. Brahman is a greater source of that essence, and it's a neuter term. It has nothing to do with God. God is a masculine, one male creator being noun. Brahman is a neuter term for the greater forces of this inner essence, which Hindus call Sat Chit Ananda. See how deep we are into Hinduism already? And this is why the prefix to yoga is so important, to show how Hindus are seeking this Atma Darshana, if you will, this insight into one's inner essence. So, for example, we have Karma Yoga, Hindu ethics, Bhakti Yoga, Hindu devotions, Raja Yoga, Hindu meditations, contemplations, more appropriately, Gyan Yoga, Hindu studies inwardly, outwardly. Within those classic four, which are termed Chariya Kriya Yoga Manyanam in Tamil land, we have Hatha Yoga, Hindu devotional postures, Mantra Yoga, Hindu devotional chants, Japa Yoga, Hindu devotional chants on beads, Nada Yoga, Hindu devotional music, bhajans, kirtans, Natha Yoga, Hindu devotional dance. And you know, of all those classic Hindu yogas, obviously, this has nothing to do with hot yoga, power yoga, dog yoga, laughter yoga, nude yoga, goat yoga, beer yoga, Ted's yoga, Kino's yoga, Adrian's yoga, blah, blah, blah. Actually, you know, if it's not Hindu yoga, it's all hot yoga, meaning stolen. So there's only one of those classic Hindu yogas that the Rishi says, please don't put this one on display. Can you guess? That's the very one today under the guise of so-called yoga, which again has nothing to do per se with the physical body at all. Why? Because the Rishis knew, obviously, this dealt with the physical body, and unprepared people, naive people, would just associate it with the physical body, which is what's happened. And perhaps some kind of vague spirituality. Totally out of context. So, historically, yoga comes from Hinduism, obviously, and you can find it also in, to a certain extent, the various yogas in Buddhism, Jain, and Sikh, because they are religions that came off of Hinduism, right? But they're certainly not in Christianity, they're not in Islam, they're not in Judaism. It's not universal. The Yoga Sutras, for example, by the Saiva Hindu Guru Patanjali, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika all situate yoga within explicitly Hindu worldviews. This is a whole different worldview, very, very different than the monotheistic religions. And to not inform people of what they're getting into is disingenuous at best. It's very hurtful to both the Hindus and the non-Hindus, because people are duped into something that they really don't fully understand what they're getting involved with. I remember once a girl came to class, and she'd called before and said, I want to take some yoga. And I said, do you understand this is all about the Hindu religion, Hindu dharma? And she said, yeah, I know yoga. And she thought she knew everything. She walked in and saw all the pictures of the deities. And being a Catholic, she said, I'm sorry, I can't be here. And she, in shock, walked out. See, this is the problem of not being upfront with somebody and having a term so distorted that people are clueless to its origin. Because today is frequently marketed yoga as just stretching, fitness, stress reduction, and all the nonsense in the name of yoga. Now, here's the caveat. You know, if people want to do stretching and relaxation and meditation, then fine, do that. That's honest. That's English. Call it that. You can even charge money for it. But as soon as you add the word yoga, it's totally different. What are we doing? We're doing Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Hatha Yoga. And Hatha Yoga was supposed to be the one that was reserved for those who were fully prepared and not to be put on display. And of course, true to all of the religions of the world. Anybody can study them if they want to. That's fine. That's the student. But a teacher of any of the religions of the world is logically, honestly, always a member of that religion. This should go without saying. As a non-Christian, you can walk into a Christian church, you can sit there, but would you ever even think or consider, I wonder if the person up there is a Christian teaching? You wouldn't even think about it. But people go to so-called yoga classes and yoga studios, they don't even query whether the person teaching is a Hindu or not. And again, true to all religions offer their basic teachings free of charge. It's a donation basis. That's how precious it is. It's not a commercial commodity to be sold. Yes, there's a business end to all religions. They have to survive, and they have publications they sell. But it's open to everybody. That's how precious it is. And then everybody can come, rich or poor alike. Doesn't matter. Of course, donation is very important. The organizations have to exist. But the modern yoga classes is totally antithetical to that. So most of the practitioners have little awareness of Sanskrit, Hindu philosophy, deity traditions, mantra, meditation, or the broader spiritual aims historically associated with yoga, though they may throw a few Sanskrit words around. But remember, Sanskrit's a religious language. As soon as you use any Sanskrit word, if you're honest, you have to recognize you're drawing on the Hindu religion. And just think for a moment. All the religions of the world, and in this case Hinduism, they only developed because of people who dedicated their whole lives to that. So we're totally insulting all these past individuals, known and unknown. So, you can see this same pattern in Ayurveda. Classical Ayurveda includes not only diet and herbs, but also ethics, spirituality, mantra, sattvic living, devotion, reverence for cosmic order, and even invocations to Hindu deities. The very first page of the Ayurvedic texts give reverence to Hindu deities, right? Devotion is really the most important part in one's healing, according to Ayurveda. Remember what the word means, life of the Vedas. The Vedas are Hindu scriptures. Imagine if you had a class, Life of the Bible, and then denied that this was about Christianity and turned it into some wellness routine. So the point is, with this stretching and relaxation class, that would be the honest thing to do. However, if a person really wants to learn about Hinduism and become a Hindu, that's open to them. Just as you can join any religion. You can join the Hindu religion with much study. Then you go through the Namakarana Samskara. You take on a Hindu name. You give up any past affiliations with any religion. This is just logic. This is the way life works. It's like you can't be married to one person and then just leave that person and marry another person. It doesn't work that way. We're talking about something profound here. Of course, to the shallow-minded, this means absolutely nothing. Our great Hindu sages warned us against the misuse of words and concepts, terminology. For example, Rishi Kalidasa, fantastic story there, because he didn't start out as a smart man at all, to say the least. But through his dedication, devotion, and devotion to Kali Ma and Saraswati Ma, he became a rishi. And he said, Vagarta Vihiva Samprikta, words and their meanings are ever united like a marriage. Of course, in today's divorce culture, perhaps anything goes. And, do your homework on the many, many scandals within the yoga world. And Saiva Hindu Guru Patanjali, too. Remember, he didn't teach any specific physical asana. He just said find one steady, comfortable pose, Sthira Sukhamasanam, to what? To actually go into the absolute, Ananta, and to transcend, not enter into. Transcend duality. Dvandava anubhikataha. And he said, Sabdhi anandupati vastu sunyo vikalpaha. You enter into delusion when you take word knowledge that's devoid of facts. Wow. And yet, this modern spurious Ashtanga yoga is really, everything about it is antithetical to what Patanjali actually taught. In many ways, this ancient warning perfectly describes the modern condition. We inherit these sacred words, concepts, principles, religious rituals, etc., from people who dedicated their whole lives to it. And then we forget about them. We forget the civilizations, the philosophies, the disciplines from which these words and concepts and principles all emerged. Right? So we got to ask ourselves, are we being fooled? Are we fooling ourselves? Are these merely natural evolutions of language, or are we witnessing the gradual stripping away of historical and religious spiritual context? At what point does adaptation become appropriation? Yes, we've adapted the Hindu yoga dharma by speaking English, but appropriation is totally divorcing it from Hinduism. Big, big difference. At what point does simplification become distortion? At what point does accessibility become erasure? Now, these aren't easy questions. Cultures have always borrowed from one another, but there's a difference between borrowing and stealing. Language naturally evolves, traditions spread, adapt, and change, yet honesty also matters. If we remove words entirely from the civilizations, from their philosophies, from their sacred traditions that gave birth to them to begin with and continued, then we risk creating a world where profound concepts just become fashionable labels like Lululemon, $1,500 for quote-unquote yoga pants, 200-hour yoga certifications. Come on. What can you do in 200 hours? It takes 1,500 hours to become a dog groomer. And what happens when you take something from its roots? It dies. So perhaps the lesson here is that words matter. Think of the proliferation today of all these crass, foul words. There seems to be no filter anymore. People throw the F-bombs around all over the place. It's horrible. What about the niyama of Saucha? Be pure in body, mind, and speech. But, Patanjali's Saucha was really severe because he was teaching Saiva Hindu male gurus in training to become so deep within that they even discarded their body. They weren't infatuated with the body at all. Read what he says about Saucha. Svangajgupsa paraira samsargaha. You need to become disgusted with not only the bodies of others, but your own body. That flies in the face of today's so-called yoga, where we have smiling girls in revealing clothes, doing all kinds of physical postures. If they want to do stretching and gymnastics, fine, do that and call it that, but that's not yoga, my friends. When words lose their original grounding, whole civilizations can become misunderstood through the very language used to describe them. Restoring balance may begin not with rejecting cultural exchange, but with rediscovering core concepts: honesty, context, humility, and a respect for origins. Remember, this is a human problem. 2,000 years ago, in the Vedas, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the Rishi said, Asato ma sadgamaya, lead me from untruth to truth. Often they say unreal to real. Today we could say phony to real. Asato ma sadgamaya. And they go on to say, Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. May I humbly admit my ignorance in many areas of life and move towards an ever more enlightened state of being. And then we can find peace, but it's a peace through strength and justice. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.